Hello, I'm Roger Woods, minister with the Walled Lake Church of Christ, located in Walled Lake, Michigan, about 40 miles from Detroit. So glad you could join me today for this sermon, pre-recorded sermon for Sunday, September 25th, 2022. September's almost gone. What has happened, folks? Sorry I missed you last week. I got jammed up and didn't get that pre-recorded sermon done. You can always go to the website and catch the recording of our streamed service, and you will get the sermon that is there, which was the first sermon in a series on 1 Thessalonians. I encourage you to go back and listen to that. It does build on, today's sermon does build on that sermon from last week, and I will explain that more as we get into it. By the way, our website is Walled Lake, WALLEDLAKECOC.org. And you can go there to our website and be able to catch all that information. Watch our live stream. We also offer a opportunity to join our Bible classes on Zoom. You can contact our church office through the website and be able to get more information on that. As I said, I'm in a series on 1 Thessalonians, and the first sermon on that is available pre-recorded, and then last week's sermon, you have to go to the streaming recording of the streaming service to catch. And now this week, we are continuing with what I started last week. Last week, I intended to go to 1 Thessalonians 2 and focusing on verse 10, on the concepts of holy, righteous, and blameless. As I worked on that sermon, trying to put all three of those into one, I realized there's no way I can do that. And so last week, I carved them out as three individual sermons. So last week, we talked about holy. This week will be righteous. Next week will be blameless. So I hope you can catch up on last week. Thank you for joining me this week, and I hope you can look forward to joining me next week as we continue to explore this topic. Let me read our passage, which is taken from 1 Thessalonians, the second chapter, verses 10 through 12. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. I believe Paul carefully chooses those words to describe his behavior when he and his fellow workers were among the Thessalonians. Our goal in these sermons is to better understand these attributes and understand why they are what we need today to answer the false accusations that Christians do face even today. Last week, I noted the context of Paul's use of these terms, holy, righteous, and blameless. He uses them as a defense against the false claims made by his enemies in the Jewish community. We also focused on how these same characteristics are effective for defending against the modern-day detractions of the Christian faith, even detractors within the Christian faith. In verse 10, Paul says to the church, you are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, blameless we were among you who believed. Last week we looked at holy, and we examined why living a holy life, a life that is dedicated and set aside to serve God, is so important, why it is an important witness to believers as well as non-believers. This week, our focus is on the characteristic of righteousness. As we noted last week, we often think these attributes are unattainable for the average Christian. In the case of righteousness, this is due in part because of our misunderstanding between the role of our works in relation to God's saving us. We cannot earn eternal life by our works. but we can lose it if our lives fail to produce good works. So being righteous is not about earning our salvation. It's about being obedient to the call we answered when we were baptized into Christ. And this is an age-old problem, this understanding of the difference between works and grace. It's an age-old problem that Christians have dealt with from the very beginning. We read in the New Testament when James has to remind the saints that faith has more to do with it than just intellectual consent. It's more than just a head thing. He writes in James 2, verses 17 and 18, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But some will say, you have faith, I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. The two go together. So if, as Paul declares in Romans 3, verse 10, no one is righteous, no, not one, why should we try? What is the point? There would be no point if it were not for the grace of God. The shorthand definition of righteousness is doing right. In and of ourselves, we just can't do that. We don't produce righteousness from within ourselves. We're given it as a gift. In Romans 3:22 through 23, Paul teaches that, quote, this righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. On our own? Yeah, we've all fallen short. We've all sinned. But with Christ, we receive in him the gift of his righteousness. This is often called imputed righteousness. His righteousness helps us become mature spiritual beings who can then begin to produce the fruit of righteousness. This fruit then becomes the way the world knows that we belong to Jesus. On our own, it's not possible. But with Christ, all things are possible. So, why is this term so difficult for us, but especially for those outside of the church? Webster's dictionary defines righteous with having two primary meanings. First, conforming to a high standard of morality or virtue. And second, following the accepted rules of moral conduct. Let's pause a moment and absorb the synonyms for the word righteousness. Those words that are similar, that go along with and really build up and enforce or inform the meaning of the term. Here are some of those synonyms. Decent, ethical, good, honest, honorable, just, noble, moral, nice, principled, respectable, right-minded, stand up, straight, true, upright, upstanding, virtuous. Now, I want us to think about that list for just a moment and ask ourselves, is that really such an unobtainable list? I'm not talking about obtaining that in a perfect way, but it is something that we can aspire to and be somewhat successful in. We see that around us all the time. And let me ask you another question. Who would you rather hang out with? A righteous individual or an unrighteous individual? It kind of seems obvious to me. I'd rather hang around those decent, ethical, honest, honorable, just, noble, moral, nice, principled, respectable, right-minded, straight, true, upright, upstanding, virtuous kind of people. I really would. Rather than I would like to hang out with scoundrels. Yet many choose, even Christians choose, to get entangled with those who are unrighteous, even to the point of mocking someone who is trying to live in a righteous way. Why have humans, since the beginning of time, attacked the righteous? Think about it. Cain murdered righteous Abel. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. The religious leaders delivered Jesus to be crucified, even when the Roman governor said he was innocent. There's a tale from the 16th century that is really illustrative of how the world will attack those who seek to live righteous lives. It goes like this. A 16th century European man who did not drink to excess, curse, or abuse his workmen or family could be suspected of being an Anabaptist, and on that basis persecuted. Anabaptists were Christians at that time who were the spiritual ancestors of the modern-day Amish and Mennonite people. But isn't that a telling sign? If you were righteous in the way you dealt with other people, you were suspected, and on that basis, you could be persecuted. And yes, today we do see some types of attacks on Christians and upon righteous behavior. It is not easy to live a righteous life, but it is possible. Let's first examine some of the barriers that we face in being righteous. First of all, it's our selfish, sinful nature as human beings. We don't want anyone else to look better than us. I think that was the problem with Cain. Abel looked better than him, and he didn't like that. And so we attack their virtue to justify our puffed up sense of self. You know, I can still remember as a kid in middle school the razzing I got because I would not curse. I was too afraid of my mother. I didn't want to get whipped. It was more than that, but I would not curse. They would say to me, "You think you're better than the rest of us woods." And then they'd taunt me while throwing every vile word that they knew in my face. I'm not saying I was a perfect child. I'm still not perfect. But because I would not curse, I was directly attacked, personally attacked. And it wasn't a pleasant experience. But because I kept my integrity in this regard, I grew emotionally and spiritually. Their instinctual actions towards me could have become a barrier to me following God and following His will. But because of my faith, and I think more so the example of my parents and other Christians, I did not give up just because I wasn't perfect. Now, a second barrier for us is conversely that we can develop ourselves an attitude of self-righteousness towards other people. And that is often what the world is reacting to because, folks, it's just so easily seen through. This is the attitude the Pharisee had in Luke the 18th chapter as he looked down his nose at the sincere worship of the tax collector. Folks, it's not a flattering look. Not at all. There's a story appeared in the February issue of Newsweek magazine about a woman. Her name was Beatrice Feduick, who decided to write a resume for heaven as her obituary. She died at the age of 94, and the Winnipeg Free Press printed the resume/obituary in its entirety. It starts, "Dear Lord, please accept my application for eternal life. My resume is as follows." And then she divided her obituary resume into sections, just like a real resume. She had objectives, she had references, she had training, she had experience, she had her volunteer work and her hobbies. She justified herself to God by saying, "Lord, you know that, as a teacher, I never had any teacher's pets. Rather, I put my heart into teaching those with learning challenges or difficult family situations. It was here that I feel I did my best work. I continued to volunteer work. I knitted scarves for the underprivileged and for children. She ended her obituary by writing, Lord, I hope that you will find that I have met my objectives and deserve a place in your heavenly home. You know where to find me to further discuss my qualifications. Whew. Folks, God is not impressed with our resume. He's just not. He is impressed by our relationship with his Son, Jesus Christ. We need no other qualification than that we have lived in and for him. Self-righteousness wants us to justify ourselves and show that we deserve. Humble righteousness helps us understand that that's not what God expects or wants of us. A third barrier that I see, and there are probably more, but I'll deal with 3 today. It is a sermon. We can only have 3 points, right? And that is fear and frustration. Fear and frustration. They're also a factor that keeps us from living truly righteous lives. It seems that all our righteous efforts, they go unnoticed. They go underappreciated, and quite frankly, sometimes they just are resented. What's the use? What's the use? You know, in his book, Trusting God in the Darkness, author Christopher Ash asks, what are we to make of the Bible passages that seem to speak quite straightforwardly of blessings following obedience and curses following apostasy? Ash urges that a distinction be made between the general truth of such sayings and the absolute every case truth. He offers the following illustration. He says, suppose there's an earthquake and it strikes a well planned out city like Manhattan with its clear ordered grid of streets. If I want to go from point A to point B after the earthquake, I would generally still be best advised to go by the main roads. But whereas before the earthquake, that would always be the best route, now I might find that the main road has been blocked. And also that some building has collapsed to open up some unplanned route. It is a little like this with the created order after the results of the disruption that we call the fall of humankind. In general, keeping God's commandments and living in line with the created order will bring peace and prosperity. In general, for example, if I'm honest and work hard, I will do better. But not always. And the final proof that righteousness pays will not come until the final judgment, when the disruption will be put right and the creation reordered as it ought to be. I found those words helpful. Generally speaking, the righteous will be recorded for their faithfulness. That validation may come in this life, or it may not. It may not come until the day the Lord judges all humanity. By faith in Jesus, we understand that, and we do not grow discouraged even when we suffer for righteousness' sake. We are able to be hopeful because of our understanding of the difference between a righteousness by works and one that is by grace. That's an important difference. And that difference is illustrated by a ride on a commuter train. So a train rumbles into the station, its warning bell clanging. The doors open and a uniformed conductor steps out. And you climb on board and find your way to your seat. When you look around the car, you see that there's tickets clipped on top of all of the occupied seats, paid for with hard-earned money. They confirm that you paid for the right to be on that train. Now, if the conductor finds you without a ticket, you will either pay on the spot or you will be escorted off the train at the next stop. To ride this train, what matters is the paid ticket. Now, that's a good illustration of righteousness by works. I paid for my spot on this train. Righteousness by grace, on the other hand, works in a very different way. God's train pulls into the station, the warning bell clangs, the doors open, and the conductor steps out. Masses of people crowd into the train and find their seats. Most everybody wants to ride this train to the city where no one will die. Eventually, the conductor walks through the packed train to see if everyone belongs on board. But on this train, the conductor is not looking for tickets clipped to the top of the seats. In fact, anyone who tries to pay for the right to be on this train will be escorted off promptly from the train at the very next stop. That's right. No one can earn the right to be on this train. What the conductor looks for, however, as he walks seat by seat through the car, is the penniless people that he knows by name, the people who are his friends and who completely lack a means to pay. These poverty-stricken people climb on board with only one hope. They believe in the generosity of their conductor friend. This is righteousness by grace. A ride on God's train is a gift. By our standards, that's unfair. In fact, it's scandalous. But like it or not, it's heaven's way. And that reminds me of the old Curtis Mayfield hit in 1965. People, get ready. There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage. You just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. All you need is saving faith. Faith with feet on it. Faith that relies on God and not on self. I want to encourage you to put feet on your faith by turning to God, by submitting to Him, confessing your faith in His Son, Jesus Christ, and then accepting the free gift that He offers us, His righteousness, by obeying Jesus' command to die to ourselves, to be buried with Him, and to be raised again to newness of life. That is what Christian baptism symbolizes, what it's all about. You go under your old man, the old person. You rise up, new creation, by water and the blood. You rise up with a gift more precious than any other, His righteousness. And because you are clothed in Christ, then God sees Him. He sees His righteousness that is imputed to us because of our faith in Jesus Christ and our obedience to His will. If you need help obeying God, if you need help obtaining the righteousness that is by faith in Jesus Christ, please, I would be more than happy to help you. Contact me, and let's together learn more about this great, gracious God and His righteous acts on our behalf through His Son, Jesus Christ. Thank you for joining me today. Have a blessed day.